the former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, just threw a couple of her coworkers under the bus. Now, this was her memoir, right? I'm not going to give the name because I don't think anybody's really interested in reading the memoir as is, but there was a couple of interesting sections in it that I'm going to talk about. And this was, of course, mentioned in the Washington Post. Now, they, of course, got an advance copy of her book ahead of its Tuesday release, which coincidentally is a release of Disney Plus. I'm not being paid by Disney Plus or anything like that. In fact, I kind of hate the whole idea of all this media consolidation, but at the same time, Mandalorian looks kind of good. But anyway, I think more people are going to be interested in that compared to Nikki Haley's book. But then again, that's just me. But anyway, in that book, and going to the actual interesting parts of it, is when she talked about John Kelly and Rex Tillerson and their efforts to, in her view, undermine the president, right? She said that she was shocked when then White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson told her about their efforts to, quote, save the country from Donald Trump. So already we have a story, just like the stories that we have with John Bolton, where like literally the worst people end up being the good guys in the story and where everything is horrible. So now Kelly and Tillerson confided in Haley that when they resisted the president, and this is from her book, they weren't being insubordinate. They were trying to save the country. It was their decisions, not the president's, that were in the best interest of America, they said. Look, where's the lie? I mean, look, here's the thing. I disagree with John Kelly and Rex Tillerson on essentially everything, every policy issue, right? So Kelly, for example, was almost as hardline anti-immigration as Donald Trump is. Let's note that for the record. That he actually pretty much agreed with everything Trump did on immigration. Okay. So not only that, but you also have, the CEO of ExxonMobil, who is essentially only there to make a $500 million deal with the Russians for oil. So he's in it to make money. How did they become the so-called heroes of this story? No, insanity, right? It's bad when those guys are like, oh man, this is getting horrible. We need to pump the brakes on this thing. No. Okay. Now, Haley also said that Tillerson warned her that people would die if Trump was unchecked. Now, is that true? Yes. Even checked, Donald Trump supposedly checked, people were still dying from the Trump administration. For example, drone program. Now, the drone program was started under George W. Bush, ramped up by Barack Obama, and then ramped up even further by the Trump administration. So where it was bad when George W. Bush was doing it, and then even worse when President Obama was doing it, it is now even worse now that Trump's doing it. Okay, so that's bad. There's people dying, right? So now you also have what's going on in Syria, right? Disaster in Syria, especially with abandoning basically the Kurds, right? And the subsequent deaths from the Turkish invasion. Then you also have what's going on in Yemen. And it's not just in foreign policy, by the way. Look at the impacts of climate change. The wildfires in California that are even worse, that continue to get worse and worse every single year. And look at what we've set up in the future, by the way, as the current administration ignores climate change, which largely has to do with companies, corporations like ExxonMobil buying up politicians and funding supposed think tanks or so-called think tanks that disseminate climate, denial propaganda. Guess whose fault that is? The former CEO of ExxonMobil. That would be, of course, Rex Tillerson. Not only that, but look at the kids in cages, right? Immigration. John Kelly supported those hardline immigration efforts. So now that's the thing, right? Nobody is a good guy in this story. They're all bad, all bad. But here's the thing, those quotes tell me that even these guys who do believe in extreme things and have caused harm in their own right were worried about Donald Trump being even more extreme. And you know what? You know what sucks? I believe it. I think it's true. Now, you know who didn't believe it? Nikki Haley. Now, Nikki Haley, she said that she believed administration officials had an obligation to carry out Trump's agenda since he was elected. Now, in a democracy, I guess that would make sense, right? But we don't live in a democracy. We live in a representative republic, as Republicans always tend to point that out. And here's the thing, we have something called the Electoral College. Now, Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote, and you don't have to in a representative republic because, again, we're not a true direct democracy. The people do not elect presidents. The Electoral College elects the president. And so, again, this isn't like a mandate. And I know I love how Republicans say mandate, mandate, mandate. Look at how many votes we have. Look, we've got the American people on our side. When in reality, no, you had the Electoral College on your side. That's why you're president. And in fact, you don't have to have, as we've seen in several elections, by the way, Bush v. Gore being one of the biggest ones, but also now with the Trump presidency, you can lose the popular vote and still become president. And in this case, a deeply unpopular president. So I don't buy the mandate explanation, especially considering how little people vote in this country, right? You basically have around a quarter of the country that voted for Donald Trump. They're the ones that voted Donald Trump in, again, with the Electoral College. So I'm not buying that whole thing, right? So now she also said that she felt Kelly and Tillerson should quit if they so strongly agreed with the president. Well, one of them did. John Kelly did resign, and Rex Tillerson was fired. Rex Tillerson was fired because he basically called Trump an effing moron. Which, hey, same thing, I guess, right? If they don't like it, they should say something or do something, and that's exactly what they did. So now Tillerson, by the way, declined to comment on Haley's allegations. Tillerson being a very, very private individual, right? Used to running his own thing, used to running his own corporation, and essentially destroying the planet with that corporation. And when you're destroying the planet, you don't really want to be bothered. So I understand why he didn't say anything, but John Kelly did have a response to this. Kelly told the Post that he's, quote, guilty as charged if working against Trump means providing Trump, the president, with the best and most open legal and ethical staffing advice from across the government so he can make an informed decision. Now remember, John Kelly, it's not as if he didn't agree with Trump on the policies and the substance. So, again, not a good guy. Not a good guy, but still guilty as charged. But so here's the thing. You might be wondering why Nikki Haley, of all people, who on the surface appears to be a more reasonable Republican, right? Again, this is not my opinion. You ask the establishment Republicans, establishment Democrats. Oh, Nikki Haley. Oh, yes, of course. She's so agreeable. Well, then why? Why would she throw these two under the bus? Especially since she was critical of him during his election. Well, we've seen this happen with a lot of Republicans, most famously Lindsey Graham, right? Now, Lindsey Graham latched on to Donald Trump after John McCain died, right? He latched on, for one, I guess there's a couple of reasons. For one, never met a war he didn't like, and he's trying, of course, to suck up to power to try to get us to launch a war with Iran. Second is he kind of needs and I don't mean this in a particular context, but he needs a quote unquote boyfriend, right? Somebody to hang around like he did with John McCain. Somebody that he could be pals, best buddies with, right? And now that is, of course, Donald Trump, where they go golfing together, right? I don't think that she's Lindsey Graham. She's not a Lindsey Graham in this case. But what she is she's an opportunist. Because, of course, right? Nikki Haley, she knows the Republican base. Now, Haley is Indian American and obviously a woman. So now those two things with the Republican base are actually massive disadvantages to the Republican electorate. Again, there are a lot of people out there, and there were interviews done by Emma Vigeland and others that worked for the TYT at the time, and they were asking Trump supporters, and there's a significant portion that said, "I don't want a woman as president," and that was, of course, their rationale of voting against Hillary, or at least one of them. And there are plenty of rationales against voting for Hillary, but I don't think that was, the fact that she's a woman would be disqualifying at all. But I don't think that way because that's not something that progressives think about. It's not. No, we look at the issues, right? We're issues voters, whereas a lot of Republicans are unfortunately identity voters. Okay, so there's that, right? So now Nikki Haley knows the base, and she's trying to navigate that base. Some of which, of course, she'll never get, but she might get some of the more establishment Republicans, but also trying to get some of the Trump-supporting Republicans by defending him. And she knows defending Donald Trump, especially on his impeachment, is as she goes on to, as she goes on to explain further on in her book, memoir, right, is that, look, she's going to defend Trump on impeachment, think impeachment's like a bad idea, and subscribe to the Trump talking points in order to show the base that while she looks different, she's actually still one of the good ones. Now, one important note that tipped me off in the story as to why she would do that is that Haley is considered one of the Trump administration's most loyal officials. And the reason, of course, that's important, right, is because she provides Republicans a shield against the charges of racism and sexism. Look at Nikki Haley. We can't possibly be the racist, sexist party. Establishment Republicans love having that shield. But not only that, but she is very widely viewed by Republicans as a top presidential contender for 2024. So now, if you're a party that is fading into irrelevance as the country gets browner, but still wants regulation, tax cuts, and wants to shed the appearance of being overtly racist, right? Wouldn't you want somebody like Nikki Haley to run when Donald Trump is done with his terms? And not just that, maybe an Ivanka Trump afterwards. It can't be a sexist party if you put up a woman. I'm just saying. After Donald Trump, I think Republicans want to have a nicer face, to put a nicer face on these horrendous policies. Look, that's what I do. And if you're Nikki Haley, of course, you benefit from being president of the United States, being able to ascend as the first woman in power. Look, a lot of this is speculation, I understand, as to her motives to defending Donald Trump. But come on, you can't honestly be a smart person and believe that there was no quid pro quo and that everything that Donald Trump is completely 100% above board. No. Come on. No, here's the thing. She knows she's a smart politician. She's savvy, right? I think she knows the surest way to get on Donald Trump's good side, and the side of the base, of course, is to defend Donald Trump and to attack his enemies. And his enemies right now just happen to be, obviously, the Democrats in impeachment, but also these turncoats named Rex Tillerson and John Kelly. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.